Welcome, everybody, to our first episode of Agentic SaaS Talks for 2026. It's a really fun session today. We're going to look back at all the lessons we've learned and mistakes we made and places we were right and places we were wrong for 2025. It's also kind of a moment to stop and say thanks to all the amazing people who joined us for this series over the last year. We've had an amazing opportunity to talk to some of the leading minds in tech, in the founder space, in AI, at what has clearly been one of the most important years in tech, and I can say that having been here sadly from the start of it. And so I'm old enough to have been here before the internet, and I'm not quite deck old for any of the old folks. Somewhere before, when deck was cool and the internet was starting is when I joined, but. I'm joined with the three of my favorite people and some of the original folks of this series. And so the Agentic SaaS Talks is a community, and we welcome anyone listening in to join and participate and sign up to join one of our broadcasts or join one of our online discussions. But I'm joined with kind of three of the founding members, Bill, Erwin, and Markus. And we're going to start this show kind of looking back on, where our podcast has evolved from along the way. Because if you're a little newer to our series, we started as Agentic SaaS Talks. It was something that Erwin and Markus started as they both work for AWS and talked to hundreds of new startups and established and successful companies throughout EMEA as they're starting their journey of building out these motions or building the next billion-dollar unicorn throughout EMEA. And they found a need for a community like this. And so that community has established. It's been a lot of fun, but it's also evolved as the tech has evolved. And so, Erwin, I'm going to turn it over to you and kind of talk through where we've come, where we're going, and how that relates to kind of the industry as a whole.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. First of all, it's really nice actually to be again on the show. So I cannot even believe that 2025 was actually it's finished so quickly, right? We had 19 episodes of Agentic SaaS Talks, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But how everything actually started, Markus and me, we both work in the startup team, and you meet a lot of those startups. We are both SaaS specialists, so you start recognizing patterns of how startups are actually building their SaaS, what are the common pitfalls, mistakes, and you have feeling that you can actually help them beside just having meeting with them or whiteboarding session with them. So then in a conversation with Markus, we said, okay, why don't we actually start collecting those patterns and writing? That was, believe it or not, in 2023, right? Let's on LinkedIn, let's go there where our customers are, where those startups are, will read our articles, and then when we recognize a pattern, let's write an article that actually talks about that particular SaaS pattern. Right? We were talking about SaaS only back in the days, and because we set an extremely ambitious goal. We said in 2024 we will actually write one article per week. I thought, maybe it's cool to write it, to release it every Monday where people come to the office. and then the name came as let's call it SaaS Mondays. And then, we didn't stick to a one article per week, which is actually I it was even crazy to believe that we can actually do that with day-to-day work. There are topics, but you cannot follow up on that. And I remember one of the articles that I wrote back in the days was talking about SaaS anywhere. Basically, it was actually don't lose control over your control plane or something like that, right? So keep control over your control plane. And I was actually right. I wrote that article. I think people in Omnistrate call it bring your cloud, right? At AWS, we have a concept which is called SaaS anywhere. And I wrote that article, and then I got like from founder of Omnistrate, Kamal, who's also part of the SaaS Agentic SaaS talks. And he said, hey, this is quite cool. We are actually doing exactly that, what you said in your article. Let's jump on a call. And we did that. So it turned out that Kamal is ex-Amazonian. So he used to build control plane for RDS, for relational databases. Extremely interesting. We kind of connected also on a technology level and on a personal level. And then Kamal said, okay, can I join that community? How can I help you? How can we actually build it together? And we started actually working that was now 2024. We started working on those topics. Bill and Michael then joined, thanks, funny enough, thanks mostly to Kamal, who is actually, works together with Michael, and he knew Bill better than I did, although Bill and me, we work in the same company.
Right.
But then that actually gave us a push. And I remember that, I think, Michael, it was you who said, why don't we start inviting people to talk about SaaS and recording, podcasts with guests? Let's roll that out as a trial. And we did at beginning of 2025. We were still called SaaS Mondays, and we still talked about SaaS, inviting people. But already there, right, end of 2024, we had that SaaS is dead sentence out, right, by Satya Nadella, I think, and people kept talking about that. And personally, at the beginning, I thought, oh, come on, right? SaaS is a delivery model. Nothing will happen to SaaS. We will just integrate AI. Assistants came, AI agents came, and later then I recognize, you guys recognize it sooner, that SaaS will actually be changed, or that the delivery model of agents actually has something in common with SaaS, and we can talk about those topics. I'll add one more sentence. We started actually talking more and more about how AI influences SaaS, and how we can actually through patterns that we have in SaaS also how we can use those patterns to start delivering AI. And then we also realized that on the market, if you just talk about SaaS, it was a crazy year, 2025. 2025, if you don't put AI in something in your title, nobody will read your article. So what happened is actually we felt that we need to rebrand. And you all guys, you were there, right? It took us months to come up with the right name, and I'm really happy with this current name. I think it was actually based on a sentence that Bill said. Sometimes we're actually having just we're talking about Agentic SaaS, and then I think Kamal and Michael came with Agentic SaaS talks, and as the name, I'm very happy with the name. And this is basically in 2025. What we did, we had almost 20, so 19 episodes with guests inviting really kind of cool people, amazing people that I for the first time met online, who are in the meantime running their own, or started their own agentic startups, or they're actually working at established SaaS companies, who shared their experience with SaaS, with AI. And this was actually, this is the story of rebranding, right? So I'll stop here now. Markus, maybe you could also give your view.
I do want to actually, I have a question actually for Markus there, or call out to Markus there, because one of the things that in preparing for this episode, I've looked back at all of what we did over 2025, and there were some amazing sessions. some of which for folks who were, ahead of the time, and they were talking about stuff, and I'm shaking my head like there's no crazy, you guys are crazy. But there were a couple of customers, folks that we talked to along the way that were building things in February and March that I thought were unrealistic. There's no way AI is going to do this for you. And they went from being ahead of the curve to being swallowed. They went from, I'm doing something no one thought possible, to, oh no, yeah, ChatGPT already does that for me. And that happened in about 4 months. And Markus, you called that out in the speaker notes coming into the session. So I would love to actually you kind of talk about that. We all walked into 2025 thinking, hey, listen, yeah, I tried vibe coding. It's cute. It doesn't work. You still need professional developers. And then halfway through the year, we all realized, oh, wow, never mind. This stuff's good. It still needs supervision, but it's good. And so can you talk about the pace of innovation and what you were seeing? Because I'm not sure I've ever seen anything change so fast in my life.
Yeah, 100% agree. So, the story that most resonates with me is the one that I was presenting the latest and greatest to a customer end of 2024. It was working okay-ish, I would say, but heavily hallucinating when it comes to vibe coding, right? So it would make up functions that wouldn't exist. It would not take into account existing code and function it could reuse, all the kind of stuff. And so it was like, yeah, well, that's nice, right? And it took not even half a year. I think it was less, maybe April, May, this time frame around, when there was such a advancement in the technology out there, I think driven by Anthropic's new models and stuff like that, that from one day to the other, literally, it became a relevant tool for every software developer and for every software company to take into account. And if you fast forward to today, I think there is no question around it anymore, right? I think it's the laggards today that will hold back and say, hey, any line of code that was not crafted by an individual is probably suspicious. I think this is the pace that we have seen over there, and I'm just talking here about the software development area, but this basically is to some degree also transferable to other areas. But I want to stay for a second here in this software development bucket, or we can even take it a bit bigger and say the product development bucket, because given this high pace that we have seen, this came with a lot of disruption, right? You could sit back in the corner and say, hey, this is just a phase, right? This is just something that we can potentially leapfrog. We have seen technology come and go, all the kind of things. But it didn't work out like this. So now what we definitely see is almost all companies we work with, they have changed the hiring process. Yeah, you have a problem with employability if you are lean back and say, hey, this is just a period in time, and I will wait for the next train wagon to jump on. This is now making it difficult for you to get rehired if you are not skilled and if you are not used to kind of take into to leverage the tools that are out there. And it also kicked off a discussion on what are the skills that are really needed in these days. And yes, this comes at the moment from the software development side of the house, but I think it's equally important for many roles that we will see across a company. And maybe I give it back to you, also pass it on to Bill. What do you see in this space?
Yeah, I agree.
Let's share experience here a little bit, because I don't want to make it a monologue.
Well, and I've got a great question. So Markus actually set us up really well there, Bill. So I got a question for you. My first big boy job in IT. So I was a system architect, and my job was to show up at shops, and I did it from some really large companies over the world, and so Micron and the rest. And my job was to go in there and do the really hard things no one else could do. And I prided myself on doing it. It was so much fun. And then my first big boy job in IT, I now have a team. I'm the enterprise architect for Simplot, which is a much bigger organization. And they say, hey, fun fact, I'm now measuring you not on how many systems you deploy, but I'm measuring you on how many systems your teams deploy. And your bonus will reflect every time you touch a system yourself. I'm taking a bonus away from you. Just so you know, I am paying you too much to ever touch a server. If you touch a server, you're dead to me. And making that transition from, hey, I'm the IT doer to I'm now the supervisor was hard. Yeah. Is that where we're going? Is that where we're at with AI? Are we now all AI supervisors, or is that the transition we all have to make? Or if so, how do you get the doer experience?
So I think it depends on the perspective you're looking at this from. So let me, since in the spirit of having this be a recap for last year, let's call back to Sri from Rocks, which was a great episode. I mean, if anyone hasn't watched it or hasn't seen the SaaS Summit, I think Sri has a really interesting perspective. His company, ROX Rocks, Revenue Operating Systems. From his perspective, now, if you ask Sri, what is AI as a tool? It's like, well, it's unlocked the capability for him to build this complete company with very low headcount. He's managed to build something very cool, very quickly. He's got huge customers. So from his perspective, this has unlocked him to become the supervisor of AI, of like all of this AI. On the other hand, his product allows you to do things you didn't know, to supervise things you didn't know how to do in the first place, right? This sort of what he was talking about in that episode. And I hate to say favorite because it's like saying you have a favorite kid. Maybe that was my favorite episode though, because it introduced a lot of these new concepts into the conversations. The concept of the one-man unicorn, for example. AI definitely is creating the capabilities for you, Michael, going back to your context of being the supervisor, not just to supervise the things you knew how to do and had sort of been promoted out of doing yourself into supervising other people, to being to a point where you can supervise things you never knew how to do in the first place. You can go and say like, hey, I want to do this thing, Python analytics. I don't know Python analytics, but I could do it by tomorrow because AI has unlocked the capability for me to do things I never knew how to do in the first place, without me having to get hands-on with them, really, just simply instructing and creating blueprints for how to do things. And I think maybe that was the most eye-opening episode for me, because I was aware people were doing this, but we'd struggled with the sort of monetization of it. It's like, okay, I can do cool stuff. I can create a toy. I could do this. And everyone was sort of like, that's cute. People kept saying like, yeah, that's nice. I see what you're doing. It's fun. This is the first time maybe I would talk to a founder who was like, no, it's not cute. Like, I've actually created an operating system for you to be able to do an entire concept of something you had never understood in the first place, but it unlocks this capability. And I think we're ratcheting in that direction way more quickly than any of us could have envisioned. At the time, I think we probably had said, this idea of a one-person unicorn, is it real? And I think we were all like, yeah, it's it. Now I'm kind of like, maybe, yeah, like maybe this is actually real. Maybe I could take a Rocks and take Omnistrate and take these different building blocks and do things I don't actually know how to do, and supervise an entire company and monetize that company by myself as a one-person unicorn. Like, it doesn't seem as outlandish as it did 6-7 months ago when we talked about that, at least. So going like to your story, like before you could be a supervisor of what you knew. Now you could be a supervisor of what you don't know. And this is kind of an evolutionary jump for me in this conversation.
Yeah, beyond any doubt, I totally agree. And so, Ermin, going back to kind of some favorite sessions and the rest, I don't want to call him out by name because he's one of the smartest people, and I'm not going to call it the session in general. But we did bring in one of your EMEA customers who was doing at the time one of the most outlandish thing I ever thought I heard possible. He was going to allow people to build a software app based on a prompt, and that was something he was suggesting. Hey, I think this is possible now, and he was saying that back in February. He started building it in 2024. We were rolling our eyes at him, and he was so much smarter than we were. He was so much further ahead, but he wasn't running fast enough because I just did that last night via Claude, Anthropic and Claude Code while I'm sitting on my couch watching a football game. Now, and so how do you? I mean, you're talking to a lot of startups. You're talking to folks about, hey, what's coming in 2026. How do you instill to them a sense of urgency? Because I'm not sure people see it from a looking forward to 2026 perspective. If AI keeps going as fast as it's going, there's going to be some very clear winners and some very clear losers. You have to act now. You can't wait.
Yeah, agree. Right. So I saw this is not the only use case where I saw that startup potentially loses against the competitors because of the speed, right? So your whole product becomes a feature of a bigger competitor, right? So you have that. We had that before AI, so this is not actually just AI specific. So what happens is you start to build something which is actually novel and different, and then your competitor, which is actually bigger, sees that as a potentially nice feature to include it, and because they're bigger and stronger and they have more people, they actually do it, and they already have customers, they have delivery channel. It's easier for them to serve that. So where it could also shift.
If I can make a quick confession, sometimes the bigger guys like Microsoft, we would FUD the channel. If we saw someone do something really cool, we would announce it. That's part of our next product, even if we hadn't even planned it in our next product, just to freeze the market and make people do it. So we knew it was going to take us 2 years to build it, but we will announce it just to stall your spot in market. But what I think we're saying is they're not just announcing, they're building.
Another thing that could happen is also, right, I create my startup, I try to build something novel and cool, and then company like Microsoft thinks, oh, this is really cool what Ermin is building, let's buy the company. And there I have suddenly a very nice exit where Microsoft actually bought my shares. So it doesn't need to end with losing the game against the big people. You have also very positive examples of Lovable, who's actually doing the same thing, right? So building applications based on on prompts, and they're extremely successful, right? So I saw also now in the meantime startups who lost a game against Lovable, and Lovable is not such a big and old company. They also just started, but they're actually they're extremely successful, and now because they're extremely successful, for them it's easier to build those features into their products. So from looking at the episodes, I know that this, I wouldn't address or attach this or take this as a AI issue. I saw that before AI, and we had situations where startups would actually simply lose, and they would need to pivot and do something else. The idea was great, but the speed of execution or the people, resources, power was not there. Delivery channel was not there. So it's actually that it's the life of the startup. That's why probably 90% of the startups, according to statistics, I don't even know if it's true anymore, fail actually.
Well, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I do think though that what we're going to see in 2026 is a little bit more of you're going to be required to actually execute. And so going back to the Microsoft days, if someone announced something cool or brought out something cool and we thought that's interesting, we would announce that feature, knowing that we had 2 years, so we'll stall the market, see if you're going to do something. That it gives us 2 years to build it. And your other statement is, if we also saw something, you'd see the big guys come in and buy it. Sometimes because they wanted it, and sometimes they just we're going to disrupt that idea and we're going to park it over here. I don't think that's on anyone's playbook anymore, because if the bigger guys see it and like it, they're going to build it because AI allows them to build so much faster. And if they're not going to buy you to park you, they're going to buy you to use you. So I do think from my first prediction for 2026 going forward is those acquisition hires. So acqui-hire, what do you want to call it? So buying someone just for your idea. I don't think that's going to happen nearly as much anymore because it's too easy AI makes it too easy to copy the idea. And so you have to have your idea, execute, go to market, sell stuff. I think the successful guys are the ones who actually do it, not just talk about it. And so I think the idea of the concept of having an idea, building a proof of concept, and then expecting some kind of cash out or event, I think those days are done.
I think an interesting fact is if you look back, like what happened over the course of the year, and I think a startup is always a risky undertaking, right? So, I mean, you put it right. There are so many startups that fail, and we probably never hear of them. We only have a survivor bias and see who is still around and successful. But I think this technology shift also brought this to a new level. So if you think back, like, at the beginning of the year, maybe it was good enough, or at the end of of 2024, maybe it was good enough to put an AI sticker on your website to go along. But in 2025, that changed dramatically, right? So because, yes, you think you're on a novel idea, but there's already the next generation behind you and waiting to disrupt you. And you thought, maybe a couple of months before, you thought, hey, I'm the disruptor, right? So, I'm the one that is actually trying to get hold of a couple of customers that are still on a very traditional way of doing things. And now a totally new league comes up, and they are so much faster. They are so much leaner in their whole organization. And now I think that also takes for a startup that is to a degree settled, takes the risk to another level, because now they have to fine balance, how they want to maneuver this situation. And I think we had one episode with Dennis Zapetsin from Honey Sales. They came from a certain business model where they would basically, it was a business process outsourcing, we can say, where a company could hire them for doing some sales activities, and they basically pivoted. They could have gone further on with their story, but they saw, hey, the market is dramatically shifting. The whole sales processes are heavily influenced by the way these LLMs are making things possible. We cannot afford to stay on this old, let's say, business model that was successful to the degree that we had it at some point. We really need to make dramatic shifts and go fully into this agentic space. And yes, maybe these are still some exceptions rather than the norm, but I think we will see more and more like this, companies that have to make pivotal decisions on how they go forward, even if they are a startup, taking into account what's the art of possible today, and also what is the expectation from the market in a relatively short period of time.
And I can't agree more. I found his session to be one of the most honest sessions I've ever seen. He opened the kimono and said, listen, this is what we built. It was working just fine. Our customers liked it. We saw this coming. We tried it a couple times. We talked to a couple customers and we realized, crap, we had plans for what we're doing next year. Those plans are gone. We have new plans now. And so I loved the open, honest conversation he had. And he was also really clear about, I didn't understand how to do this. I wasn't an expert. I went and figured it out. He also highlighted some AWS programs that I didn't know about, and I'm not an AWS guy. Again, as my old joke is, if anyone wants to know Azure, that's the color Azure. So old school Microsoft guy, but everyone we brought on has been really kind to the benefits that the AWS community has brought. And so speaking of which, one of my favorite sessions last year was by one of the AWS SaaS legends and kings in terms of John Lawrence. And he was talking about the issue of identity and figuring out where identity and security fit in an AI world. And so I do want to kind of throw that question over to you, Bill, because if you're newer to the series, you may not know Bill is also one of the legends and kings in the SaaS world within the world of AWS. And so if you research much around how do I build a SaaS, eventually you're going to find a talk or a white paper or something from Bill. And so Bill, John, I think, was on something. He also was pointing out some startups that are winning in that space, like Vercel and Supabase, who, even though AWS and all the rest of these guys offer some services that are better, that are similar, they offer something that's better and fitting the need, and therefore they're getting the audience. So I don't know which side of that you want to take, but I do think it's interesting. So where do we look in 2026? Where are we looking outside the clouds for services that we like, and also identity security? Where does that fit in 2026?
There's a lot there. I mean, what we should do is have John Lawrence back on, because he's an amazing thinker in terms of vision, in terms of planning and understanding what's coming next. I'll work backwards in your question a little bit, though. You mentioned Vercel and the stacks that John's been working on, and I've kind of been, as a lot of people probably realize, we worked on the same team at AWS, and he's since moved off. I've been keeping very much in touch with him in terms of what he's working on and what he's thinking about. And I won't, I'll let him talk about the things he's building and he's talking about, but it's the tool sets that he's arriving at. I think as a visionary, one of the things John said to me early, and I think we're still seeing this evolve, is the cloud primitives that we talk about are shifting. The idea that most developers in an AI-driven world are going to want to go set up their own S3 bucket or go and run an EC2 server, it seems like an anti-pattern, right? The way AWS is built is amazing in its own way. It gives you this huge tool set to go and be able to say, hey, I've got every size widget, every size wrench that I could possibly ever want to try to solve the problems I'm solving, and that's great. But the fact is, it's a very small subset of people in the world that can actually pick up that tool set and use it properly. Even most of we talk to SaaS customers all of the time who are working on AWS. They do a small fraction of our services, and they're smart people. These are not dumb, uninformed people. These are very smart people doing very important tasks. And you still might say, like, hey, have you ever thought about this? Like, oh, I haven't even heard of that service. When did that happen? When did you guys introduce that? So I think John is kind of onto something, and that the cloud primitives, while important, really need to be abstracted out for a vast majority of the audience that's going to be building on AI. So when he's talking about Vercel, or when he's talking about Master AI or Personas AI and all of these different things that he's tools that he's exposing, I think he's sort of speaking to a vision that he has, where it's not that we're going to be building different things, but the way that we approach them and the way especially startups begin their journey is going to be dramatically different. Vercel is a revolutionary in this area. Like, they were one of the first ones to say, listen, nobody wants to run infrastructure as code. Nobody wants to understand those things. We will deal with those for you. We want you to focus on adding value to your customers. They, of course, did it for, working backwards from a UI perspective, right? They started as UI. Now they're building more and more of those primitives into their stack, where it's like, okay, you want to deploy a database, click a button. Now you got a database. Congratulations. Now you're using a fully featured database. You didn't even have to understand how to set it up. We just did it. Okay, now they're moving into AI, and they've got their V.0 stack, and you can use AI to build tools. All of these things are just going to continue to evolve. And like we said, Vercel is the cutting edge, the coolest thing right now. In the meantime, 10 other cool things are happening probably outside of our view that are even going to challenge our assumptions about those. So I think John's vision on where this is going, and he was talking about this again 6-8 months ago before everyone else was thinking about it. I think it's important for anybody who's listening, who's building, to at least challenge those assumptions. Like, what would it mean to use Work OS versus going and learning Cognito and all of the other primitive tools? And can that get you to market faster? I think for most products and most builders, the answer is probably yes, right? So I think that the first part of that question about the stack and whether primitives are really where you should be starting, or whether you should be building on these very cool partner tools that are being built out there and thinking about those first, I'm very much in his camp on those things. The second thing you talked about identity, about thinking about what it means in this new world, I think are kind of brain breaking still. What does it mean to be an individual in this world, right? We've always kind of had this company-centric view of like, okay, I log into this service because I signed up for the service, and they know who I am through this, window of the world that they have into me. But increasingly, people being spoofed, identities being stolen, products, entering the same things into multiple services, our individual identities being passed between services outside of our view, right? Where things are increasingly getting more and more connected, and AI is able to deduce, like, hey, I never signed up for this service, but this one service calls it, and this AI learns something about me, and it can reach out and find out all sorts of other things about me and build its own identity. In this world, the vision for what identity even meant entirely changes. We may have an entirely digital footprint of how we identify ourselves. For example, I was talking to a company that does fraud the other day. The financial fraud is huge, by the way. It's a huge business. Like if you're not in it, you might not realize what a large business fraud is. But the simple fact is, in a traditional world, when you wrote a check and you handed it to somebody, the people who were cashing your check didn't know necessarily who you were, right? There were multiple parties in this transaction. And eventually those things would be reconciled. Maybe a check bounced, maybe a check was found to be fraudulent. In this real-time world, millions of dollars being exchanged real time. And that identity of who you are on both sides can now be established really quickly with AI. They can detect fraud, even though, you might be writing a check against Chase and, the money's being sent to Bank of America. Bank of America might not know who you are, but these fraud systems sitting in between now can build pictures of your identity and identify flags for fraud so quickly that window for, committing fraud is closing down to an extent. So, and that's based on identity. It's based on the ability to understand in this digital world how AI understands who we are and how we get ahead of that. And one of the things John's advocating for, which I think is really interesting, is that there'll be software that verifies our identity outside of applications, that this will move with us through the digital world. And like, I'll let John talk to that because he's so far ahead of me on that topic. But it's really one of the things he's broken my brain on in our conversations is this idea that everything we think about identity is probably wrong now. It's insufficient. It's behind the times. And in AI, it has to move so much more quickly and be so much more verifiable. And then the choices we make as individuals about what it means to participate in those models and expose our own data is going to be challenged as well. So I think we just have to have John back on to talk about these things because he's such an amazing thinker and it's such an amazing group of topics. But yeah, again, one of my favorite episodes.
We
If you think
also
about
had
the
one.
episode, I think he was also making a good point in saying, hey, the value proposition of your application may change totally, right? So far,
Yes.
You put a lot of efforts into let's say a UX, right? That is easy to understand, easy to use for a human, right? And maybe that was the way of thinking, the way of acting yesterday, and it was compelling and maybe even relevant for making a sales. But in future, and I think he pointed it out, or he hinted at least into the direction, you have to also think about how to make it, agent friendly. And, is my application the entry point for a user in the first place?
Yeah.
And all the kind of things. So I think at the moment, maybe we are kind of in the area where most of us think of how can I enrich my application by some AI capabilities without, letting it or letting the user experience change completely. But I think this is probably one of the next steps, right? There cannot be so many applications, competing for your primary attention, for your eyeballs. At the end of the day, you will have a few entry points, probably conversational interface or natural interfaces to you as a human. And then under the hood, a myriad of machines, agents will go off and do minor tasks, bigger tasks, dissect tasks, and come up with a result that hopefully pleases you. And I think this is maybe something to also keep an eye on in 2026. I think there we are just at the beginning.
If I may just add one thing, Mike, before you continue. Am I online?
Yep. You're
Sorry. So what? Just to plus one on what Markus and Bill were talking just a couple of seconds before, reminded me also on one of the episodes that we have with Josh McKenty, which I could recommend for people to go and watch, because a couple of reasons, right? One thing is actually what he's building right now, which is exactly this one. So this digital identity in the age of the AI, right? So how to make sure that you're really talking to Ermin, and how I can identify, or how I can actually identify my agent. So really cool stuff. And the other reason why you should go and watch that episode is because Josh has a lot of those cool stories about that time where he was a NASA engineer. And Michael, you mentioned also how you were actually trying to sell Microsoft to NASA, and he went to build OpenStack. Really cool episode. I really kind of had a lot of fun. It's if you want to hear some kind of good storytelling, go watch the episode with Josh McKenty.
Yeah, I can. Anytime I get a chance to talk to Josh, which actually, going back to Erwin, what you said about why we started this talk, we were meeting once a week and doing this conversation anyway about what white paper should we write. And what we found is, this conversation is so much fun. We should record it, because I learned so much from talking to you guys. That's the whole reason we do this, is we're going to do this anyway. We should record it, because every time I talk to you guys, I get smarter. Josh is the same way, although about halfway through any conversation with Josh, you'll realize how much smarter he is than you. And so it's good to both learn new things and also get a bit of an ego check, because he comes across as this nice, go-lucky, happy guy. And then halfway through, you realize, oh, actually, I'm only catching about half of what you're saying. And so, it speaks to the fact, he was building OpenStack and fighting the OpenStack versus CloudStack before cloud was a thing. And now his new startup is to go help solve identity in the age of AI before all the rest of us actually realized, oh crap, that's going to be hard. And the stories he has around it and the things he's doing in that space is just typical Josh. I highly recommend that episode too. Loved it a lot. Okay, so we've got 10 minutes left to the top of the hour. I do kind of want to start this one with, what's your 2026 prediction? So, I'm putting you guys on the spot here. What do you see? And just to be fair, because you guys didn't know that question was coming, I'll actually go first. And I'll go first with this ridiculously bold statement that sounds crazy to say, coming out of 2025. Starting 2026, I canceled my ChatGPT subscription. I don't use it anymore. Gemini's better for graphics and technical docs, and Anthropic with Cloud Code and Opus 4.5 is simply unbelievable in terms of doing agentic work for me. And that agentic work can be file management if I'm doing it via CLI, or it can be writing an application for me, or building a website for my poker league, all things I was doing yesterday while watching a football game. So, but that's my close 25 statement. Here's my prediction. My prediction is, and I have friends at Anthropic, so I apologize if I'm saying this around. I predict I will probably cancel my Anthropic membership by the end of 2026, because somebody new, cooler, and better will be here. And so if you don't think you can be disrupted, OpenAI had the world, one AI, we were all convinced. We are now in Sam Altman's, we all worship the shrine of Sam Altman. He is still amazing. He is still cool. OpenAI is still amazing. They're still cool. But I don't use them anymore. I've moved to the next thing. If OpenAI can get disrupted in the age of AI, anyone can get disrupted in the age of AI. And so my prediction is the tools we are using today will not be the tools we use come December of next year. And that to me is insane, because these tools are already far more science fiction and magic than I believe they could ever have been. Who wants to go next for 2026 prediction?
I can go next if you like, right? So but also the story that you told about OpenAI, and now you're actually moving to Google with Gemini and things like that. this is also a little bit, what we mentioned with startups starting strong, but then, big guys with high, with stronger power and muscles overtaking them along the road. Because they simply have a better delivery model, like with Android. But okay, I'll stop here on that topic. I have basically three things that I think, it will actually become very important in the next in this year, basically, not next year. What I see is actually that data and data company are actually doing way better now thanks to AI. I didn't expect that, because I thought, AI, you can actually ask it, and you don't need your data warehouse, you don't need your data lake and things like that. What happened is actually, for me as a company, to have good AI, I need good data. So I need data is actually the only thing that I cannot stripe away and throw it. So this is the persistent layer. My application, my SaaS front end can change, data stays. So I see that companies like, I don't know, Snowflake, Databricks, they will actually continue gaining new customers. This is just kind of, my prediction. Also because, things called context engineering, to kind of, create your context, you would need the data, but I'm not an expert there. So for me, I think, data will become even more important. Another thing, and you mentioned it somehow, Michael, when you said, I moved from one LLM to the another LLM, I think LLM generally is becoming a little bit, commodity. You can actually use any, they're all good, they're all do the work. So another question is, it's not anymore, it's the open AI, it's ChatGPT and nothing else. Compare it to others, we all kind of, we will probably be looking into the right tool for the job, and not actually just, focus on one single LLM. And the third one, and I'm too bad that Kamal is not here, I think control plane will become more important. Control plane was important in SaaS, but the world will not crumble if you don't have it. With agents and AI, so with agentic SaaS or agent as a service, I think control plane becomes even more important than what it was in SaaS. I think this is actually a piece of software that where engineering time will actually go more and more. So those are three predictions for this year.
I totally agree. And I think the difference between agentic software and agentic SaaS is a control plane. So if you have agentic software, great. Do you want it? Is that really relevant? No, because it's one customer at a time. If you want to go fast, you need agentic SaaS, and the difference is a control plane.
Yeah.
Bill, what's your prediction?
I'll hop in because I think it kind of dovetails pretty well with what Ermin was saying about the control plane, and I'll kind of drive off of that. We spent a fair amount of time this year talking about monetization. So we had a couple episodes. We had Finn Glover and Akshay Patel on. They were talking about monetization. We had Capgemini come in, and they were talking about how to build products for profit and SaaS. That topic hasn't changed, but maybe some of the context in the industry is changing. Like you were referring before, like this idea that the acquisitions is going to be like the only way out for these companies. I don't think that's really how you build a new SaaS AI startup now. I think there's still probably opportunities to just build some vaporware and get bought for $1 billion. It's going to happen still. And good for you. I mean, congratulations if you pull that off. Awesome for you. But the reality is, if you look at the acquisitions that have been happening, like, for example, Confluence acquisition, it's companies that have really strong competencies in their software and have proved it and proved the monetization of how that they can take that and use it to add value with AI that are getting acquired now. So I think there's going to be a fundamental shift, and it always comes back to monetization, right? I think we're going to be talking, if we talk about this a year from now, we won't even have thought of all of the things that monetization are going to affect. But there's going to be a proliferation of more software. We've unblocked the ability to create new software. There'll be more and more out there, but it's going to be, how do you successfully transition that from something you built that's a cool toy that does something into something that's cool, that companies are willing to put their dollar on the table for, and that show the real value of what they're adding, that will be the ones that will be the acquisition targets, because that still is one of the primary exit events startups are going for. If you're trying to make yourself attractive, if you're going for an M&A, be able to put on the table the actual projectability of how what you've built is going to lead to dollars, and how the functionality you've done enhances the portfolio of what a large company already has and could build themselves, because it isn't a mystery to them now. Maybe it was a year ago, of how to build an AI function. Everybody kind of understands now that they can unblock these things and build them. You've got to show them that you've jumped several pieces on the checkerboard, right? Like you're not just simply like moving a step forward. No, you've acquired and you've done things that will show value to the bottom line of the company and to the functional capabilities of a company. And that's going to be a lot different than some of the early acquisitions we saw this year, where you kind of look back now and scratch your head and say, like, $10 million of revenue for $1 billion acquisition. I don't know, maybe, okay, good for you. But I think that's going to be the thing that changes. Much more rational decisions around what has value and understanding where that value is coming from.
I couldn't agree more. And I do think expertise will continue to get bought, and expertise will continue to get rewarded. So if you are a depth expert in something, capitalize on that before somebody else does. And so I do think AI it empowers experts to be even more experts. And I think that's a going back to your example of Confluent. I think that's a great example of an expert being an expert, because Jay and the two others invented Kafka, started Confluent. Jay's still there, and so experts breed better experts. But the second thing, I think it also ties back to what Ermin said. Data is winning, because the better data you feed your AI, the better things happen, the better results you get. And Confluent's all about data. And so I think that the two reasons IBM made a spectacular acquisition of Confluent. I agree.
Agreed. Yeah.
Markus, best for last. What do you got for us?
No pressure on me. I'll go with two shots. So one thing that goes into the data bucket, but also in the integration bucket, is what has changed, and what I have big expectations on is the fact and the capability that we can now make sense of data that are unstructured and at large amounts. And these LLMs and these foundational models, they are let's say the key to it. So I think we were collecting data in large quantities for a decade by now, but with the technology at hand, we can now really unlock the value out of it. And I think this is changing a lot of things that we can see going forward. And the same is the integration space. So far, it was really hard to break out of the silos of individual applications and come really to a good end-to-end flow and also to say pane of glass in terms of visibility of what's going on. I think all these kind of things are gonna go away, and I cannot wait to see how this materializes and unfolds. But the second thing here is we are talking a lot about the product and product capabilities at the moment. And that's cool, right? I think that's at the moment where the music plays. But I was working with a startup recently, and I just, from my 5 cents, right, their product is okay-ish. Yeah, it solves a need, and there are some agentic features sprinkling across. But what they are really sets them apart, and I think that's also what the investors are realized, is that they are super good in some other parts of the business. For instance, in predicting the conversion and predicting how to make, let's say, spend dollars for achieving good results. So what I'm trying to convey here is that I think we are focusing too strongly on a single aspect of what's going to happen, right? So the technology is amazing and it makes all sorts of things possible. But I think, like when Google came, right, it was not just the search engine that they came with. It was bidding for AdWords, right? It was a lot of innovation that came together with the search engine that made it so powerful. And I'm expecting even more so in this wave that we are just riding with the agentic and AI, upcoming technology changes.
Well, it's also kind of funny that I just realized we talked the entire session and didn't talk about what I predicted, and I think all of us predicted is going to be the 2026 year, word of the year, which is context engineering. And so it's such a fast-moving space and such a fascinating time to be in the industry. I also did talk to a really cool startup last week. I didn't bring it up today because I don't understand the space nearly as well as I should. But there's DLLMs coming out as well, and so LLMs that can process more than one token at a time. And before that really didn't matter, but now suddenly trying to get efficient LLMs out there that can answer questions in near real time and answer questions and also do the next thing. And so they're applying it right now to voice so that they can do, because they can process more than multiple tokens, the latency on the response is dramatically lower. Now, the quality may or may not be as good, but if you're ordering a hamburger, does it really matter? And so your ability to suspend the disbelief of the person that they're talking to a person is very much tied to that latency. And so DLLMs are coming, context engineering is coming. So we have a whole bunch of really cool and fun topics to talk about in 2026. I can't wait to see what's next. All I know for a fact is I don't know what's next because, again, I've never seen an industry change this fast. But I'm going to very much enjoy talking through those changes and what happens with you guys. Thank you guys for an amazing 2025. Here's to another successful 2026. And thank you everyone for listening. Catch us again in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, everyone.
Good show. Thanks.